mean, is there a way for you in the role that you're in to create a somewhat different climate where people at least don't go to the recourse of, if my person loses, therefore the election was unfair or not correctly run, or some version of that argument?
Yeah, that's already part of the culture of the extreme, right? And that sore loserism that is sort of embedded into a small portion of the body politic, and it's just something we're going to have to deal with. So it would be impossible for me to be able to, with a straight face, say that we're going to be able to eliminate all of that, right? Sore losers are going to be sore losers no matter what. But I think one of the things that we can do, and we are doing pretty well, is starting with the basics, right? Starting with working across the aisle with the legislature. Of the 6 pieces of legislation that our office is pushing, 5 of them are being sponsored by Republicans. One of them is a Republican who's an election denier and has sued me several times, and he's sponsoring one of my bills. And that's because we're being pragmatic, we're being reasonable, we're being realistic. I'm not.
What is that bill, actually? Just give your.
It's a bill to allow this office to certify elections officials in even-numbered years. It used to be that we could only run our annual certification, our biannual certification, in even or odd-numbered years, and that was to really avoid kind of getting involved during the election year. But now, right, because we've had such a loss of election officials, we're going to have to do it in the even-numbered years. I'm sorry.
Have you had a loss of election officials? Because so many people are saying,
"Oh yeah,
this is too intense, and I don't want to be in this."
Absolutely, Arizona is one of the epicenters of this. 92% of our voters are going to be voting with elections officials that were not there in 2020 during the last presidential cycle. 12 of our 15 counties lost one of the top 2 senior election officials. The Issue 1 report that came out last fall put out information about how bad it was here. And so we've lost a significant number of our elections officials, and that experience really, really matters. And so, we're doing all of the training that we can. And in this particular circumstance, getting back to the original question, we have one of our fiercest election deniers allowing us, because it's forbidden in statute right now, opening that up so that we can actually certify election officials during the even-numbered major election years, which was originally not permitted. So this gets back to the notion that we are slowly but surely chipping away at the rancor. We're doing it because we're being reasonable. We're being very data-driven in our approach to legislation. That puts us in a space where we are familiar with folks on the other side, even the election denialists, and we're working with them. And that just makes it harder for them to continue down that path of conspiracy theories and lies, especially when they're working directly with us on so much.
We are very focused on the threat of elections workers and voters being intimidated. Unfortunately, there are people out there who, again, think it is in their best interest to intimidate folks. But if people are going to go, as our election workers leave after 16, 18-hour days defending democracy, counting the votes, and have their picture taken and the picture of their license plate taken, that is unacceptable, and it has to stop.
That was Bill Gates, the former chair of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, outlining threats to midterm election workers last fall in Arizona.
So I guess those election officials, or the new election officials, are some brave souls, right? For instance, you had people showing up in tactical gear at the ballot drop boxes in the 2022 midterms. Do you have a sense that that fervor has died down at all outside of the legislature, right? You're just ordinary people, ordinary Arizonians. Or are you expecting something of that same order of magnitude for the upcoming election?
Is it Arizonians, by the way?
Is it Arizonians?
It's Arizonans.
Arizonans. Forget the I.
You bought too many vowels on that one.
I'm Greek. We love vowels.
Yeah, I mean, vowels are great when you have just the right number. But Arizonans writ large are, I think, getting sick of the nonsense, I guess is one way of saying it. But there are still some of those true believers, some of those faithful, and they still believe very strongly in their Second Amendment right to carry firearms wherever they will. And sometimes they decide to do it near ballot drop boxes, which is what we saw in 2022, just as close as the last election cycle. And that really is something that I think will, to some degree, potentially be dying down. But look, we got to be prepared for it. But it's not just security at our facilities, which we saw in November of 2020. It's not just threats against elections officials, which we've seen manifest not just on social media, emails, phone calls, in board meetings, et cetera. But one of our elected officials had her dogs poisoned as a means of intimidation here. So what we're doing is we're approaching this in the multifaceted way that the situation requires. We're working closely with state, federal, and local law enforcement agencies and some of our really important partners that are watching the threats, particularly via the internet, from international spaces like Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, who all want to kind of mess around with our information infrastructure. So we're approaching it from sort of that multifaceted angle. And we've also got the new emerging threat of generative artificial intelligence and its capacity to sort of upset the apple cart in a much more quick way. So that really is an amplifier for misinformation and disinformation. It's not a new threat. It's a new way for these other older threats to manifest. But so we've got our hands full. And one of the hard parts for us is that in 2017, Elections Administration was designated critical infrastructure by the Department of Homeland Security. We still don't have sustained federal funding for it. So it's as if, the dam upriver is not funded. The villages just got to scrape it together so that it doesn't end up bursting. Like the school buses are risking going over the bridge every time because there's no funding for that critical infrastructure. It's as if the airplanes got to figure out a way, or the airlines got to figure out a way to make sure that they're coordinating their air traffic well on their own, because there's no money for it. Elections Administration does not have sustained funding from the federal government. And in many states, it falls short as well. So we're doing the best with what we have. And I've been ringing this bell for a while to try to get folks to understand that if they want to protect and preserve our democracy, we got to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a greater issue than just election funding. I mean, it's true with the electricity grid. It's true with a lot of sort of things that Congress says, this is absolutely vital, and then there's no funds to back up its vitality.
Well, the interesting thing, in particular on this one, sorry to interrupt you, is that this is the only sector of critical infrastructure that has no sustained federal funding. The only one is election administration. So, yeah.